Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum, and welcome to another edition of Debunked here on INX Prime. My name is Sulaimaan Ravat. For the better part of the last 2 years, we've been talking about the genocide in Gaza and Palestine. And it's been a regular feature. We've had various guests and different discussions around that issue, and for obvious reasons. And on a few occasions, I had mentioned that that was not the only genocide, and that there was another genocide taking place in Sudan. And because, I suppose, of Masjid al-Aqsa and the closeness that it holds to the hearts of Muslims, and the 8-decade occupation issue in Palestine, what was happening in Gaza was gaining more attention, and because of its international significance, etc. But a human life is a human life, and if it's Muslim life, then it has even more significance. Therefore, we repeatedly said we should not lose sight of what's happening in Sudan. And we did have a few programs in the last while on Sudan. Unfortunately, in recent days, there has been an escalation in Fashir, and we've heard some of what happened there in news reports. But we want to go a little deeper into the issue once again today on the program. Our guest is the president of the Sudanese Community in Gauteng, Mr. Khalid Dahab. Khalid, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much for hosting me. Let me just correct you there, because I am no longer the president of the Sudanese Community. I'm the former president. But yes, I am indeed active in the political situation in Sudan and what is happening, the tragedy that is taking place.
Now, just briefly, right? I understand that obviously it's difficult to be brief in creating context, because there are historical issues and there are various role players. In previous programs with other guests, we did go more into detail into the history, and this program I want to talk more about what's currently happening. But because the Sudanese issue doesn't feature as regularly as perhaps other issues in the news cycle and in the coverage, what is happening here at the moment in Sudan over the last couple of years? This current round of hostilities. We hear about the RSF, we hear about other role players. How would you surmise it, just to create context for our viewers?
First of all, you are correct in saying that the Gaza issue had taken, to the front, or had been at the forefront of the news everywhere. Let me say that the conflict in Sudan, that the affected people and the humanitarian crisis there are actually more than the Gaza and Ukraine combined. But unfortunately, the international media was more interested in the other two conflicts rather than the conflict in Sudan. This is one thing. The other thing is, we have to realize that in Gaza, for example, the enemy is very clear in that it is Israel. In the Sudan, it is Sudanese fighting Sudanese. So that is a very sad situation. But that is the real thing. People of one side are chanting Allahu Akbar and killing the others, whereas the others are also chanting Allahu Akbar and killing the other side. So that is the sad reality, that it is Muslim killing Muslim. The situation actually erupted on the 15th of April 2023. When an army, Sudanese army group attacked the RSF barracks in Khartoum, in the southern part of Khartoum. And then the war escalated after that into the rest of the city, and then gradually into other parts of the country. As we are standing now, it is, although there are no accurate figures, but the estimates is that there have been more than 150,000 people killed in this conflict since it started. More than 25,000 people, 25 million people have been affected by famine or are threatened by famine. In fact, about 4 million of them are directly affected by famine, whereas the rest are threatened by famine. More than 15 million people have been displaced, about 4 million of them into neighboring countries, and the rest displaced internally. More than 80% of the hospitals have been destroyed and they are out of action. More than 85% of schools and educational establishments are not operating. There are millions of children who are at school age or who reach school entering age in 2023 who could not go to schools, and now we are 2.5 years on. So they are 2.5 years behind. And let alone those who actually were at school are no longer going to school. So you can imagine the catastrophe that has affected the Sudanese people. People are dying not just by gunshots or by bullets or by bombardment shells or so on, but people are also dying from disease. Not so long ago, we had a cholera outbreak where thousands of people, and tens of thousands of people were affected, and thousands of people died. Now we have dengue fever, and dengue fever is a disease that is caused by a certain type of mosquito bites, and it does not have a treatment. It's a viral disease. And hundreds and thousands of people are dying of dengue fever because you cannot fight the mosquitoes where they are because of the war situation. So the catastrophe is so big, it's so bad that the people have been suffering badly. Unfortunately, the two warring parties do not want to heed the calls to stop the war and to come to the negotiating table. Although there is some hope that at the moment in the United States, there are some ongoing talks, indirect talks through the American facilitators to try and reach a humanitarian ceasefire. But while we are talking, one side of the conflict, the RSF, is saying they are in Washington and they are negotiating indirectly. The other side, which is the Sudanese Armed Forces side, are saying that there are no negotiations and that they will not negotiate and they will keep on fighting until they are, until they become victors.
So you mentioned early on, yes, Mr. Khalid, you mentioned early on that here it's Muslim fighting Muslim. What are they seeking? And is it realistic to expect that there could be some sort of political compromise? What do each of these two parties want at the end of the day?
Well, it's a simple answer. Both sides are seeking power, and they are seeking the resources, the wealth that was found recently in Sudan, which is gold. Sudan has become one of the major gold producers in the region, if not in the world. And the two parties are benefiting greatly from the the proceeds of this gold. So that is a very clear reason why they are fighting. The other, of course, as I said earlier on, is power. Both sides were allies. They were actually allies. It is the Sudanese armed forces that created the RSF militia to fight against rebels in Darfur. And it started off as a tribal militia. And it was armed and trained by the Sudanese armed forces. And then when they grew stronger, and they started amassing weapons and they started amassing wealth, the Sudanese armed forces, they sensed the danger. They sensed that this is a threat to them, a threat to their existence, a threat to their interests, economic interests. You will be surprised if I tell you the biggest economic player in Sudan is actually the Sudanese armed forces. They are in all aspects of the economy. And that is what they have been doing over the last 30 or 35 years. The army has turned into one big, huge entrepreneur in the country. And you know, the RSF has grown so large and so powerful that they started threatening these economic interests of the army, and as well as the power interests, of course. And that is the reason why they are fighting. They were allies. They stood against the revolutionaries after the 2018-2019 revolution. They came to power, and the civilians came and said, okay, let's do something. And they said, okay, we will do a power sharing formula. And the civilians agreed. So they came, and the commander-in-chief of the army became the president of the sovereign council, which is like the head of state. It's a collective head of state, and the head of the RSF became the deputy president of the sovereign council. And the agreement at that time was that after 6 months, the leadership of the Sovereign Council will go to the civilians. But only a few days before that date, the army then staged the coup to overthrow the civilian government, because the executive power was with the civilian government. So they overthrew the civilian government. And from that day on, both parties were killing the civilian demonstrators on the streets of Khartoum and in other cities and villages.
Yeah.
And then they turned against each other. And now the ones who are suffering are the population. The funny thing and the interesting thing is the army is blaming the civilians for this war. How can you blame the civilians who do not even have a gun? Yeah. And who are, who staged a very peaceful revolution.
So in the last few days, with this escalation in Fashir, what's the context there, and what was the role of the RSF, and why particularly this area?
Look, the RSF has a history of brutality and committing atrocities, even before this war, even before the revolution. From the day they were formed, they were attacking villages in Darfur and committing atrocities. You have to remember that this is a group of tribal people who are nomads, who live in very harsh environments, and it is second nature to them to attack and to pillage their quote unquote enemies, and to steal everything, to loot, to kill, to maim, to rape. So that has been going on even before the war. And when the revolution came, the civilians were calling for the disbandment of this force. They were saying that the army must return to barracks and that the RFS must be disbanded, and that there is room for only one national army in the country, that there shouldn't be militias or other armed groups, that there should be only one army. But funnily enough, when the people were saying that, they were being arrested and charged in courts because they were speaking against the RSF. The same RSF now that they are attacking, and they are saying the rebellious militia and the Janjaweed and whatever. The civilians knew that all along, and that is why they said they have to go. But now in Al-Fashir, they went in, they committed atrocities. Very, very bad atrocities. They have been killing people, they have been maiming people, they have been pillaging the place, they have been raping, they have been, you have seen it. We have seen it on the social media, what is happening in Al-Fashir. But that doesn't mean to say that the other side is not doing that. The other side also in the areas which were vacated by the RSF, like Khartoum or with Madani, other cities, they were also targeting civilians, accusing them of colluding with the RSF and carrying out summary executions and torture and so on. So both parties are guilty of committing atrocities. Currently, the atrocities that are being committed in Al-Fashir, and they are being committed in Bara by the RSF.
Now, there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk, Mr. Khalid, about outside, not only interference but involvement, and the UAE is specifically being mentioned. What is their interest? Who are they backing? Why? And who are some of the other role players from outside who are perhaps also trying to get their fingers into the pie? Because you spoke early on about resources.
Yes. Obviously, the resources are the key word. UAE and others are interested in the gold. They are interested also in influence in the country and in the region. UAE, although they have been denying this and it has not been proven, but the accusations are they are supporting the RSF. Whereas on the other side, you find that the Egyptians are supporting the Sudanese armed forces. Not just that, but they are also providing weaponry to the Sudanese armed forces. It is also said that the Emiratis are providing weapons to the RSF. So as long as we are having outside parties arming this side or that side, that is not helping in stopping this war. That will not help in stopping the war. We need all the outside parties to stop supporting and arming these people in order for this war to come to an end and for the suffering of the civilians to come to a stop. The army is very reluctant to let humanitarian aid pass through, and very reluctant to have a ceasefire, a humanitarian ceasefire, to allow for this aid to come through. The RSF have been more forthcoming on this side. They have been allowing aid to come through the western borders from Chad. But equally, the de facto government in Port Sudan, which is supporting the army, they allowed some aid to come in, but they make it very difficult for aid to filter through. There have also been a lot of accusations that the aid that has come in is being sold on the streets by certain businessmen or traders who are close to the army. They kind of confiscate this thing and then they sell it to the people rather than sending it to those who are in need in the conflict affected or the famine affected areas. So we really do have a problem. Aid is being used as a weapon by both parties. Aid is being used as a bargaining chip by both parties. That is not that is not how you deal with a situation like this.
Now, what needs to happen, for immediate relief? What needs to happen? We can talk about UN on a global level, intervention from other countries, but is there one or two countries that if they get involved, they can at least slow things down, if not put an absolute stop to the carnage? Is there a role for the neighboring countries, or can South Africa play a role, or would you need a bigger power to intervene?
Well, currently, a group of countries known as the Quad, 4 countries, the United States of America, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, have come up with a roadmap or with a proposal for a 3 months humanitarian ceasefire, because that is the most urgent thing, is to allow humanitarian aid to go to the affected people, whether that is in the RSF controlled areas or in the army controlled areas. You see, as I said earlier on, the reason why both sides are reluctant to let aid come in is because they say if it goes to the RSF will say if it goes to the army controlled areas, the army will take over and they will take this aid and it will not reach the civilians. And the same is being said by the other side. And that is true in a sense. There is definitely an element of truth in that. But right now, the Quad is suggesting a 3 months humanitarian ceasefire, and then negotiations that should lead to a political solution to this, and to lead eventually to a civilian transitional government that will then pave the way for elections, for free and fair elections, so that the Sudanese people can choose their government or who rules them, who governs them. That has been supported by most of the political players in the country. It has been supported by the United Nations. It has been supported by the African Union and so on, the Arab League and so on. But the army side is the reluctant side. The RSF side are more open to the idea, and they are more open to negotiating and coming to a solution. Actually, from the beginning, despite the fact that they have been the ones accused of more atrocities, they have been the ones who are more open and who have readily agreed to negotiations right from the beginning. A few months after the war started, in the Jeddah negotiations, and they agreed and endorsed the Jeddah negotiation agreement. Whereas the army then, after initially agreeing to it, they reneged on it, and it failed. It could have seen an end to the war in the first 4 weeks. But unfortunately, now we're 2.5 years on, and they're still insisting on fighting.
Unfortunately. Mr. Khalid, shukran so much for your time and for chatting to us. We really appreciate it, and our du'as are ongoing for the people of Sudan. May Allah grant them relief from this oppression.
We really do hope so. We really do hope so. Inshallah.
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 Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
That was Mr. Khalid Dahab, the former president of the Sudanese Community here in South Africa, talking to us about the latest situation in Sudan. It has come under greater focus in recent days because of the genocide in Fashir. He was giving us some context there as well, talking about why the fight is happening. It's for power, and now the newly found gold and resources, and that's why other outside countries are also getting involved. Interest, political interest and money. That's what it is at the end of the day. That's what corrupts a human being. That is what makes a human being willing to take the life of another human being, to rape a human being, to maim and to pillage places, and to just destroy and loot. And that is where we all need to be careful, even if we don't go out perpetrating a genocide. But greed for power and greed for wealth and greed for position should not make us destructive. In the end, you destroy yourself morally and spiritually, and you cause a lot of destruction to other people. Let us continue to include the people of Sudan in our du'as, and let us continue to keep the focus on that area where the genocide is taking place. May Allah grant them relief. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Until next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.